Dixie, the 10-year-old little girl and only child who lived in Pikeville, Kentucky, deeply longed for a pet. She lived with her mom and dad on a 75-acre farm. They had farm animals like goats and pigs, but she just couldn't get a close bond with them like you would a smaller house pet. Her parents had no objection to their young daughter owning a dog or a cat. They took countless trips to the animal shelter, but she could never find one that she truly adored. She's running into that beggars can't be choosers thing. So, in her solitude, she would wander around in the nearby woods and dream of what it would be like to have a true friend. One day, during one of her strolls through the forest, she came upon a strange little animal looking forlorn and dejected. It was poking its snout sleepily through a clump of flowers and was quite obviously lost. The creature looked like a baby dragon. Its body was no bigger than a cucumber. Its bright green scales sparkled like a shining gem in the partially shadowed sunlight as it squatted down on its single pair of legs. Every so often, it would open its fragile, opaque wings and flutter them optimistically. But it was clearly way too young to fly. Hearing Dixie walk up on it, it tried covering its body with its wings in self-defense. It peeked up through its crossed wings. However, as soon as it saw Dixie, its sadness and fear disappeared. It began chasing merrily around her. They both frolicked with joy. They played together for hours. It was beautiful that neither of them was no longer alone. Everybody say aw. Aw. Dixie was completely enchanted by her unexpected playmate and happily took it home with her. She was absolutely convinced that her parents would share in her delight of the tiny, friendly creature. After cradling it in her arms and talking to it during the long walk back home, she presented her new buddy to them. They recognized it as a dragon, albeit a young one. Technically, it's a wyvern. Their reaction was not what she expected. Her dad, at first, wanted to kill it. Her mother objected and insisted that she take it back to where she found it and leave it there. Her mom stated that when it grows up, it will be huge and extremely dangerous. She instructed Dixie that she'll no longer be able to keep it. Her dad eventually agreed and said, "It's a wild animal. You can't keep a wild animal as a pet." "Why not?" she asked. Her mom chimed in. "Because that thing will grow up big enough to hurt you. It might even eat you." After several minutes of pleading with her parents, they hardened themselves in a united front and ignored her tearful protests. It's kind of cold. They closed the front door behind her and watched, sadly but with great relief, as their young daughter miserably walked slowly back into the woods, followed by her strange little companion. Once out of sight, however, Dixie turned away off the main woodland path and went instead toward her secret hiding place. Oh, here we go. It was a natural alcove known only to her. It's where she spent many hours secluded from the rest of the world. She placed her newfound pet on the ground inside the hollow. It would have to remain here, where she could visit it, play with it, and feed it every day, safe from the prying eyes of her parents and other folks. Sobbing, she started to leave her new buddy behind. It let out a meager chirping sound and started following her. She turned around and pushed it back into the recess. It chirped incessantly, very much wanting to go with her. Through her tears, she said, "You'll have to stay here. I'll be back. I promise." Seemingly confused, the baby dragon turned its head to one side. She pushed it further back into the nook. Pointing at it, she said, "Stay here. Don't follow me home." With a dejected posture, it dropped its head and stumbled back into the hole. Its sorrowful chirping could still be heard as she walked away with tears in her eyes. As the months went by, Dixie's pet grew much larger and at a quite alarming rate. The cucumber-like juvenile was maturing into an impressive adult dragon. It grew to well over 20 feet long from its head to the end of its tail. They grow up so fast, don't they? Its soft green scales had hardened into razor-sharp discs of a deep emerald tone. The see-through wings had become leathery and bat-like. Its legs had grown to the size of tree trunks, and its cute little curly tail developed into a barbed tip with a deadly sting. Where's the Witcher when you need him? The bowls of milk she secretly and faithfully brought to it every day had once satisfied the juvenile appetite, but were no longer able to rid her pet's increased suffering of ravenous hunger. She needs to bring those big metal jugs of milk. Remember those? And so it began to seek nourishment elsewhere. Oh shit. Before long, the entire farming community began noticing tremendous losses of livestock. Their animals would just disappear with only small patches of blood on the ground, trailing off. Dixie's little dragon had obtained a fondness for the flesh of goats, pigs, and cows. But the worst was yet to come. It wasn't long before the perpetrator was discovered. One morning, while a farmer was feeding his goats, he heard a loud flapping sound. When he looked up, he saw what he described as a giant green bat carrying one of his goats away in its claws. A ragtag group of bold hunters and farmers attempted to dispose of the monster. They gathered together one morning and set a plan into action to purge the land of this killer. Dez saw him first. It was flying in a circle about 500 feet up at 10 o'clock. My 10 o'clock. Jumpy and on edge, he called it out, but started firing before everybody was ready. By the time everyone started shooting, the dragon had flown behind a cloud. A few tense minutes passed. It was eerily quiet. Then, suddenly, A loud roar sounded from behind them. They're fucked. As soon as they turned around, all they saw was a wall of flames. The guys on each end of the line dove out of the way just in time. The other 6 were charred to the ground. We're talking solid charcoal statues. The lethal beast roared once again as it flew nearly straight up. Bobby was hiding behind a tree, terrified. Bravely, Jimbo stepped out to get a clear shot. "Get him, Jimbo!" He leveled his gun on the beast and fired. A scream was heard off in the distance. Regardless, the monster flipped itself over, did a complete 180, and was now diving towards him at Mach speed. Dude, focus. Jimbo nervously reloaded and fired several times. As it was almost on top of him, he figured he had one more shot at it. As he was pulling the trigger, the dragon juked left. The shot missed, but the dragon's tail did not. With a powerful thud, the stinger plunged into his midsection. The beast ripped out the stinger as it flew off. A large gash opened him up. He dropped to his knees in pain. As he checked his wound, he noticed a black ooze seeping out of his stomach. He felt like his insides were on fire. Then, all at once, he collapsed. One by one, the dragon dodged the gunshots from the hunters and snatched them up with its razor-sharp claws. It dropped them from far above into its log-like nest, breaking their legs and snapping their ankles. The nest was covered in shiny and unusual objects with no monetary value. The lair was loaded with junk, trinkets, and generally smelled horrible. I've known people with houses like that. The dragon later returned to devour each one, leaving nothing behind. In doing so, it discovered another taste it enjoyed much, much more: humans. I was going to say barbecue, but Dixie was devastated by the actions of her former playmate. She bravely walked into the woods and begged it to end its murderous assaults upon the folks and the animals. But to no avail. Not even gentle rearing by a loving child could suppress the inborn and voracious instincts of a true dragon. After the onset of its maturity, these impulses had inevitably unleashed a violent deluge of uncontrollable primordial force. Jesus Christ, what the fuck? Just one person remained safe from the deadly dragon: Dixie, its lifelong companion and only friend. The flame and the fear of the dragon were never aimed at her. Only the powerful feeling of love that the heart of the most dreadful dragon contained, which was so rarely ignited by a human. She alone could walk safely beside it, stroke its huge ebony claws, and gaze without worry into its eyes of blazing ruby red. Such is the power of friendship and love. However, neither of these was enough to change the inevitable course of events that were about to take place. The dragon's tyranny had to be countered if Pikeville's population were to survive. The mayor contacted a professional big game hunter buddy of his to prevent his small town from going completely into extinction. When the chips are down, you don't fold, you call in the big guns. And so it was. One morning, a tall, muscular, silhouetted figure with several guns strapped to himself arrived into town. He stopped by the mayor's office to get more information on what he was dealing with. After showing him many pictures of the beast and showing him the damage it has caused, the hunter had enough information to execute what was necessary. The hunter was a former Navy SEAL and had seen and dealt with a lot of carnage in his life. He had a plan in mind, but had to play it loose due to the unpredictability of the dragon. He slowly and quietly crept through the thick brush. After getting tripped up a few times and startled by wildlife, he started to get a little complacent. Suddenly, from amid a tangled mass of foliage, a massive green monster lunged forward and roared. Its green, scaly covering had camouflaged it so well among the leafy vegetation that it had been completely invisible, even to the seasoned hunter. Like some kind of predator shit, I guess. The hunter fired off an errant shot and instinctively rolled to his left. The beast exhaled a large ball of fire from its mouth nearly simultaneously. The once green bush where he just stood was now nothing more than blackened, smoldering twigs. Blistered a little, but still alive, the hunter struggled to get up from within the thicket. He managed to get to his feet, but was instantly swept to the ground with the dragon's massive tail. His rifle went flying through the air, and it landed several yards away. The tremendous beast cocked its head back for one final blast to finish off its prey. Last act of defiance. Relying purely on instinct, he drew both of his pistols and fired relentlessly at the monster. An explosion of steamy, dark blood burst forth, splattering the hunter and the grass all around. Jesus! The enormous creature crumpled to the ground just a few feet away. Gurgling, it struggled to raise its head. As the hunter approached the dragon to finish off the threat, he heard a young girl screaming from behind him. She was not screaming in fear, but in a hysterical rage. Dixie came charging through the bushes. She started throwing rocks at the hunter and continuing to yell at him. He backed off with his hands up. When she got to her mortally wounded sidekick, she knelt down in the blood-soaked grass and wept uncontrollably. She wrapped her arms around the bleeding, scaly neck of her dying friend. Don't die! You're the only friend I've ever had! The monstrous creature gently nuzzled her cheek and let out one final bubbling breath, and then lie motionless. Unnerved but oddly troubled by his success in eliminating the predator that had terrorized Pikeville for so long, he coldly walked away, back to the much-relieved town. He left behind a dead monster and its only friend in the world, a small girl named Dixie. The innocence of her childhood had come to a sudden and savagely premature end.